A Democrat county clerk in Kentucky has gone to jail rather than compromise her Christian beliefs. A federal judge ordered the jail sentence for Kim Davis after she refused to issue marriage licenses for same-sex couples.
Some presidential candidates have sharply criticized that order. The case puts a national spotlight on the battle between religious freedom and same-sex marriage. Heather Sells has the story.
Kim Davis sits behind bars for taking a stand and refusing to issue marriage licenses to anyone in her tiny Kentucky county. In doing so, she's become a national symbol for many who oppose gay marriage because of their faith.
Under whose authority are you not issuing licenses?
The gay couple suing Davis had asked that she be fined, but in a surprise move, the federal judge decided to put her in jail instead, saying just a fine wouldn't be enough to bring about her compliance. At the last minute, Davis rejected a deal to allow her deputies to process same-sex marriage licenses that could have prompted her release.
She's been ordered to stay there until she's willing to change her mind, until she's willing to change her conscience about what that belief is.
Within hours of the judge's order, several Republican presidential candidates declared their support for Davis. Mike Huckabee said it removes all doubt of the criminalization of Christianity in our country. Who will be next? Pastors, photographers, caterers, florists. This is a reckless, appalling, out-of-control decision that undermines the Constitution and our fundamental right to religious liberty. And Ted Cruz said, today, for the first time ever, the government arrested a Christian woman for living according to her faith. This is wrong. This is not America. Hillary Clinton weighed in saying government officials should uphold the law, and the White House said the success of our democracy depends on the rule of law, and there is no public official that is above the rule of law. But a Wall Street Journal editorial responded, we don't recall President Obama insisting on the rule of law when his then Attorney General Eric Holder announced in 2011 that he wouldn't defend challenges to what was then the law, the Defense of Marriage Act. Protesters, both for and against Davis, are up in arms in Kentucky.
If you can't do your job, resign.
Today we come to stand for God and support our county clerk, Kim Davis.
Davis had hoped Kentucky lawmakers would find a way for her to keep her job and her conscience, but the governor has refused to call a special session. In the meantime, her deputies plan to follow a U.S. district judge's orders and issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples starting today. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Well, it's amazing how some people cite the rule of law when it seems to be convenient because it goes along with their belief system. Well, what about that rule of law when you're keeping public emails on a private email server? What about that rule of law when you instructed the Attorney General not to enforce a federal statute? What about the current laws on immigration that are not being enforced? What about all of those rules of law? Are you not enforcing them just because you don't believe in them? There's a long history of civil disobedience in the United States, and it goes all the way back to the American Revolution. And you look at the various campaigns, whether it was the suffragettes or the civil rights movement, lots of history of civil disobedience, but the price is heavy. People had to go to jail in those, and now we're seeing it. But it's for the first time, I think, in American history, where you have a public official being jailed for their religious beliefs. We'll see this. We'll be tracking this case because it's not over yet. I imagine an emergency appeal is on its way to stay this judge's order, and we'll see where it goes. Well, the state of North Carolina has taken action to protect officials who oppose same-sex marriage. And John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. More than 30 magistrates in North Carolina have refused to perform gay weddings, but in the Tar Heel state, they are protected by law. Right after the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage, the state passed a law allowing officials to opt out of performing all marriages. The law exempts court officials with a sincerely held religious objection designed for those who oppose same-sex marriage. The law's original sponsor says it's probably preventing situations like the one in Kentucky, and Utah is the only other state with a similar law. A leading pro-life advocate says lab rats are handled with more care than the bodies and organs of aborted babies whose tissue are harvested and sold for research. Marjorie Dannenfelser, who heads the Susan B. Anthony list, drew that comparison at a private screening on Capitol Hill for Democratic staffers. Around 2,000 House and Senate employees were invited to watch the recent undercover videos showing Planned Parenthood execs discussing the sale of fetal tissue. Less than 10 showed up. Most left before it began, and only one stuck around for the entire screening. The videos have prompted calls to stop taxpayer dollars from going to Planned Parenthood and sparked debate about whether the practice is legal.
Rats are treated better. There are better protocols for rats in research than there are for these children.
And Dannenfelser also says there's plenty of blame to go around.
It's on the chain, and every link on the chain of using these children is culpable. So the people who benefit financially, the people who are aborting and changing the techniques so that you can get an intact cadaver, they're culpable. The people who are doing the research are culpable morally. Of course, it's legal. And that means that the U.S. Congress is culpable because the U.S. Congress was the first body to make sure that this was all okay.
Protesters from Planned Parenthood flanked the entrance to the screening, handing out information to discredit the Center for Medical Progress. That's the group responsible for the undercover videos. Planned Parenthood says the footage was doctored. This month, at least 3 House committees have scheduled hearings surrounding evidence presented by the video expose. Well, the Attorney General of Oklahoma isn't giving up on his fight to keep a Ten Commandments monument on the grounds of the state capitol. That's despite an order from the state's highest court that it be removed. Attorney General Scott Pruitt has filed a brief in state court alleging the Oklahoma Supreme Court's ruling evinces a hostility toward religion. The Supreme Court in June ruled in a 7-2 decision that the monument is a religious symbol and must be removed from the Capitol grounds because it violates a state constitutional ban on using public property for the benefit of religion. Pruitt has argued unsuccessfully that the monument is permitted because of the Ten Commandments' historical significance. Well, the pastor of a Georgia church says a group baptism on a public high school football field was voluntary and that the school had nothing to do with it. That defense came after a protest from a secular legal group. The baptism happened on the field before football practice, and photos were posted online, which, of course, prompted a complaint from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. It sent a letter to Carroll County school administrators arguing the baptisms amounted to proselytizing. But the pastor involved says no one was forced to take part.
The school had nothing to do with this, and it was voluntary. It was after school. It was before practice.
It was just a great experience, and it really brought us all together. It wasn't forced on anybody. It was just a volunteer thing, and if you wanted to come and support your team, you could.
The school superintendent says the district is taking appropriate steps to investigate. More than 100,000 Christians have escaped ISIS terrorists in the past year. Most are still scattered across the Middle East, but now there's a new proposal that could offer some a way out. Chris Mitchell brings us that story.
Christians in the Middle East face their worst situation in centuries. Human rights observers say the West must pay attention.
They need to know that Christians are facing genocide. They need to help these Christians. They need to help them with their prayer and with aid for them to leave.
After ISIS conquered Mosul and large areas of Iraq more than a year ago, thousands of Christians found refuge in Kurdistan, others in Jordan and Lebanon. They can't go back home, and they can't work. Nina Shea leads the Center for Religious Freedom in Washington.
ISIS stripped them of all their property, and when they went into exile, they went into safe havens that will not give them residency status, that will not give them work authorization. So they have no money, so it's a very bleak picture.
Shea hopes teaming up with Hollywood producer Mark Burnett will make a difference.
We've decided that for some of the most needy cases, they need to leave. They need to start their lives over. They need to be resettled in countries that would give them work authorization, that would allow them to rebuild their lives.
They plan to resettle these Christians in comfortable surroundings.
For the Armenians, Armenia, they're Christian, of course. The Orthodox countries, we're looking at Orthodox communities, we're looking at Orthodox countries, you know, maybe Georgia, maybe Russia, maybe some places in Eastern Europe. For the Catholics, we're looking, and Protestants, we're looking at the Western countries.
While the numbers are staggering, Shea adds that Christians face a greater danger.
Now, the difference with Christians is that underneath the conflict, they're not just running from a conflict, they're running from targeted persecution against them.
She calls on the church to not only pray, but to get involved.
The Church of the West and the free world, Latin America, needs to pray all the time. I mean, not just once a year, but pray every Sunday in congregation for these persecuted Christians. And if they can contact their political representatives and the candidates running for office to say the United States should take its share of Christians as well.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
Thanks, Chris. Raising awareness of the persecuted believers around the world. Gordon, back to you.
Well, if you want more information on the Center for Religious Freedom, all you have to do is go to our website, cbnnews.com, for more information. And if you want to do something tangible, CBN's there. We're there in the Kurdish regions of Iraq. We're also there in Jordan, helping in the refugee camps there. And if you want to donate to help the Christians who are fleeing this persecution, call us, 1-800-759-0700, or you can log on to cbn.com, and on the giving page, there's a place where you can designate your gift to international disaster relief. So do it now, 1-800-759-0700.